Alright, so what you see behind me is my big gamble of last year. Some of you guys know I decided to get out of the square failing market and buy myself a round baler. And the problem with this is they're very, very expensive new. For a machine like this new, you're looking at anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 from New Holland or Vermeer, the two companies that I looked at. And it looks really nice, but I'm like, man, there's only so many parts in one of these things, and from the research I did, I found they should last anywhere between 20 and 40,000 rolls. So I was like, man, I don't know, I don't really have that kind of money to spend on this right now, and I kind of want to stay out of debt wherever possible. So I started looking around at some used machines, and I bought this thing for approximately 1/5 the cost of a new one, and I knew I was going to have a little bit of a project. I knew I was going to have to work on it a little bit, and so that's what I did. I spent, I think, 2 solid weeks working on this. I had mechanic Steve out with me on a number of days. We did all sorts of stuff to it. There really wasn't anything wrong with it. There was a lot of backlogged maintenance and a bunch of stuff that was out of adjustment. So we got everything dialed in as best as we could and hit the field, and it worked beautifully. Now, it wasn't perfect. The net wrap system still needs a little bit of fine tuning. Sometimes I'd have to stop the tractor and get out and mess with that. But there's really nothing wrong with it. It worked great, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. I really could not have hoped for anything better. And now here we are at the end of the first season that I've owned this thing. Sort of. You know, the problem with this, we basically got no rainfall until about September of last season. And so I had a very limited first cutting. I had almost no second cutting, and it just started raining. And I was like, well, you know, the rain's not going to last forever. And so when it stops, I'll do third cutting. And I never actually put the baler up at the end of the season properly. And the rain just didn't stop. It rained for almost every day for about 7 months. And so this thing's been getting rained on. You know, it still like has some nasty hay in it from second cutting. Like I said, at the end of the season, I'd really like to go through and clean everything and do this final inspection. I just never actually got to because I thought I was going to use it again. But now we're here, and what we're going to do is go through this machine. We're going to go through this machine. We're going to make sure everything is adjusted. We're going to inspect for damage. We're going to fix whatever problems and adjustments there are and get this thing ready for the 2019 hay season. So let's see what actually happened to this thing last year. So the pickup on this thing seems to be working fine. In one of my more recent videos, we opened up these side covers here and readjusted these chains. This is the kind of thing that makes me nervous inspecting stuff like this. Really got to try to not get sucked into this, but it's almost kind of necessary when you're looking for weird noises and the like. People don't understand the respect you have to treat equipment like this with. I mean, this thing will suck a guy in and rip them limb from limb without even changing the RPMs on the tractor. I mean, that's how insignificant we are to machinery like this. But this chain drive system looks perfectly fine. We're gonna get the manuals out and double check everything. Man, it runs so much smoother than when I got it. And there's really not even oil on these chains. You can hear the sledge rollers making some noise in there. Belts all seem to be tracking fine. Up and down a little bit. think we're in pretty good shape. All right, so from what I can see, there doesn't really seem to be anything out of the ordinary with this monster. So we got to clean it. We got to go through the adjustments on it, make sure everything's set for next year, and we should be pretty good. This would have worked great before everything was waterlogged with 7 months of rain. Really want to get the spring actually back in place too. That's going to be a battle in and of itself. Alright, so this is something left over from when we had to replace this hydraulic cylinder mid-season. This spring needs to be hooked on here, but as you can see, there's not all that much space for working with. It's really awkward and just kind of miserable. And this is a very stiff spring. But what this does is it helps latch this tailgate down, because this is the part of the baler that swings up like that to let the bale out. So ideally, we should really have this attached, because it'll make it so it's a lot harder to actually close this, not have it latch and start baling and like actually bend the frame of the baler. So it's actually a pretty important spring. Maybe I can like manage to screwdriver this on somehow. Goodness, I love hydraulic everything, because dealing with springs is always a pain. Oh. Man, this is a pretty resilient screwdriver. Oh. I'm having urges, which I will repulse, to just like zip tie the screwdriver in place and leave it just as is. I bet it would actually work. The diameter of the screwdriver shank is larger than the spring, so it should be stronger. Oh, that caused some sparkage. That's actually pretty cool. I've learned if I pivot this screwdriver back... Oh, too far. Dang it. That's what happens when I try and sound intelligent. Oh, almost. Really important we chop the crap out of this hydraulic hose while we're at it here. Yeah, we're just gonna drill a parallel hole. That worked every bit as well as I hoped it would. That spring, which I have absolutely no strength to pull on. I probably could if it was in a straight line, but like I'm trying to direct power upwards at this weird angle. It's just kind of awkward, but that is now in place. Should I have done this last summer when we put in the hydraulic cylinder? Yes, but let this be a lesson to you boys and girls. When you procrastinate on things, at best case scenario, you have to do the job later anyway. And a worst case scenario, you fold the backside off the baler and cause thousands of dollars in damage. Totally worth the gamble, 100%. All right, so I think I got all the hay out of this thing. The method in which I cleaned the baler after I was done using it last time, so I left the tailgate open about 2 feet and the goats got in there and they ate a bunch of stuff, but they didn't eat anything that was actually on top of the belts. I don't think they could figure out how to climb on the, stretchy rubber belts. Anyway, yeah, I don't like that I let this sit around and get all, let it get all nasty, but to be honest, what were my options? I really only had 2 of them. I could you know, let this thing get all full of water from being rained in for weeks on end and wait till we had one of those 1 or 2 day stretches without rain and then put the tarp over it. But the problem is there's all the moisture that's already in this thing, so it's going to be like a giant greenhouse, and then everything's going to get all rusty. Well, I guess that was really my only other option other than to do nothing. So anyway, yeah, got that decently clean, and I have discovered one minor problem. This is why we go through things. This area back here around these chains was just full of all that nastiness down there. It's like, man, I don't think there should be hay getting up in here. And I don't think there should be, because this little rubber flap thing is supposed to keep it all, you know, I guess it's supposed to keep all that dust and everything forwards, but as you can see, 'tis broken, and the one on the other side is still intact, and there's none of that crap back here, only a very tiny amount, but it's like starting to tear a little bit. But I mean, you know, this is rubber out of probably the early 90s or mid 90s when this baler was made. I don't remember, I looked it up once. So I guess we got to replace those flaps. All right, on today's lesson of how much does New Holland think approximately 5" by 10" piece of rubber costs, my guess is $38 a side. It might not be that much. Sometimes I've been pleasantly surprised, but we're gonna find out here. Actually, it is pretty inexpensive. It's only $13 and change. But I think that's probably the only thing we have to order. And in the interest of getting this thing in and out of the shop, I'm gonna save like over 30 bucks probably with shipping. And I think I'm just gonna make this myself so we can get the machine in and out of here. I mean, it's a piece of rubber. How hard can it be? So we got these things in place. I did kind of forget how big of a pain that cutting up tires can be, but honestly I think this is going to be better than the factory setup, simply because the factory pieces were probably about 1/3 as thick as these tire sections. And the other thing is, the factory ones, they put up a good fight, but they were old and they were starting to tear out around the bolt holes. Well, these things, obviously they have this wire like inside the tire there. They got that wire stuff in there, so it should be at least a little more resistant to tear out. And these things, I mean, I will say this does look a little redneck, I will be the first to admit, but it serves a pretty simple purpose, and that's just to funnel material into this auger, which is pushing it towards the center of the baler. And when we don't have these, stuff can back up here and go over the top, and I think that's what caused a lot of that grass to go all over the chains back there. All right, speaking of chains, we got to make sure they're all adjusted. Well, that's a problem. I've officially broken this idler, but I got to looking at it and figured out it's going to be pretty easy to fix. Essentially, the way this thing works is there's the flange, and the spring is compressed against it by the nut on the bottom of this thing, not the top. The top is just sticking out for no apparent reason whatsoever. You adjust this nut, and it forces the spring upwards and up against that bracket that I was working on. And then there's this rod, which sticks through this and pokes out the top like that, and then the bottom is level. And so this is the factory one. As you can see, it's about such and such long. Like I said, I don't know why this nut doesn't seem to serve any purpose. You're supposed to adjust it down here. I did not know that, so I tried to adjust it the only place it has a visible nut and broke the thing. And a new one from New Holland is going to cost $50, $60 for this bolt with an eye on the end, essentially. So instead of paying that, I just took about $1 bolt, and I tapped the threads all the rest of the way up this thing. And so we're just going to cut off the broken one, insert that, and it should work just fine. What could go wrong? So this is a new and improved bolt setup. I got 2 nuts on there. We'll jam nut them together. And I also added some never sees to that, so hopefully it won't get all rusty and nasty like the last one did. All right, let's see. This is gonna be fun to stuff this all back together. Got the new bolt, got this washer actually. Got our washer, goes up into this piece of pipe, which sticks out up here. Yeah, you can see how that holds itself up in there. Now is when we start compressing the spring. This is the true test of this design. We've got to compress it until, well, we got to take about a ½ inch out of this. The spring itself needs to be 7.5 inches. It's turning really smooth, so I'm thankful for that. All right, we're there. Now we're just going to move this jam nut into place. All right, success. Now the only potential issue with this is if that pipe ever like walks its way up and out of this, but I mean, to put it mildly, I really just don't see that happening. I just tried pulling on this. It's got like the sides of the spring and they're wiggling against it. I'm just really not concerned. So I think that is a success. All right, you know, it really doesn't look like it or feel like it, but there's been a lot that's been done to this machine. Fabric cobbled and installed a new tensioner, made sure these chains are all in line here, made the 2 rubber flaps for the augers. What else was there? Checked all the tension on the other springs in there. Just in general, gave everything the look. The once over here. I think this has been a success. So now I am officially ready to put this thing back to work in the field. I'm looking forward to hay season 2019. And I guess really the only other thing to deal with this is the net wrap system still needs a little bit of fine tuning. I think I know what to change, but I kind of want to be able to test it out immediately after I've changed it. So I'll just make sure I have the wrenches with me, and it's literally 1 bolt up on that arm right there. I think that'll solve all those problems. So I'm pretty excited about this. I'm also glad after digging this thing out of the pit that I'm finally, out of the mud over there, that I'm finally done messing with it for at least a few days. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more. Cheers.